President Johnson, I shall address you as president. Please, let me begin with you. What did you discuss in this meeting with Joe Manchin today?
Well, our goal was to establish a relationship and open up a dialogue. We were successful in that. We talked about how do we get to a win to protect voters. And that's the course we're going to chart moving forward. We cannot accept that, okay, he's in his place. There's no way for us to get 60 votes, because in 1963, when King made that statement, the next year we had the Civil Rights Act. 2 years later, we had the Voting Rights Act. We are on a time clock to make sure we protect the right of voters, and it will happen this year. How we get there will be the course that we navigate and opening up this dialogue, among others, to protect the right of voters to fully participate in this democracy.
President Morial, we just saw video of Joe Manchin singing "We Shall Overcome." You watch him in that video. It seems like he gets it. He certainly gets what it was about 60 years ago. But does he get what it's about today?
Lawrence, thank you for having me. I would make a few points. Number one, we asked Joe Manchin to reconsider his position on the For the People Act and on the filibuster. So the premise of our meeting was to seek to convince him to support the For the People Act. And I might add that the two bills go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. And that's a very important point. Number two, I'm outraged and insulted that Mitch McConnell, who voted for an extension of the Voting Rights Act when George Bush was president, would be so quick, so hasty to, in effect, trash the legacy of John Lewis and trash the legacy of civil rights. Shame on Mitch McConnell for doing this. Shame for putting up a blockade in front of the necessity of restoring the protections that were earned and fought and marched and bled for in 1965. We are going to continue to fight. And as Derek said, we wanted to establish this first meeting with Joe Manchin as a way of continuing to work, to push, to persuade, to encourage his support for, one, the For the People Act, two, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, three, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We have three significant civil rights bills, which I believe, Lawrence, are as significant as those that were enacted by the Congress in 1964. As Derek mentioned, it took President Johnson with his political skill and ability and a movement of people in the streets all across America, a popular movement to break that Senate filibuster in 1964 and 1965. And we have to break that filibuster because democracy is on trial. We have to break that filibuster because the legacy of what people worked for and fought for in the 1960s is once again on trial in the United States Senate right now.
President Johnson, so what happens next? Is this the first of a series of meetings with Senator Manchin?
Well, absolutely. This is, for us, an aggressive start to make sure we advance a bill that truly reflect the needs and interests for our democracy. And it goes beyond just the John Lewis Act, because the harm that state legislative bodies across the country, particularly in Georgia, have already committed the last 2 months need to be addressed. We also need to make sure that state legislative bodies are not taking advantage of this redistricting moment to so gerrymander districts that we won't be able to recognize the House of Representatives. And we have to ensure that moving forward, there is the protections necessary so local jurisdictions and state jurisdictions are not positioned to suppress and subvert democracy. African Americans fought too hard and too long. Mark Morial would have never been mayor had the filibuster remained in place to block the Voting Rights Act. So many of us would not be in the positions that we are in if America would not have stood up when they did to ensure that our Constitution was protected. What Mitch McConnell and the senators of the Republican Party is doing now is trying to impede and subvert democracy so they can select voters as opposed to voters selecting elected officials.
President Morreale, is what we're seeing here a version of the Democrats letting these bills basically come to the fore in the Senate, see them shot down one way or another by the Republicans, so that they then, with you, will go back to Senator Manchin and say to him, this cannot be done with 60 votes. There will never be 60 votes for any of these things. We have to do something about this rule.
I think it's important that there be a full and complete debate and a vote so that we can see exactly where every member of the United States Senate is on these very important pieces of legislation. And we have to demonstrate a resolve to proceed notwithstanding the opposition. And if these bills do not get passed through the United States Senate, we'll have to take whatever steps are necessary at that point. Let's say this, Lars, it is outrageous to the ninth degree what Mitch McConnell said today. He has said to me in his office numerous times over the years that he's proud of his record on civil rights. He just threw it away. He just threw it away by saying, I'm not for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Here's a moment in history in 2021 after an insurrection on the Capitol with a pandemic and a tsunami of voter suppression bills being introduced in states all across the nation, not being introduced in a bipartisan way, not being enacted in a bipartisan way. And we have the recalcitrance for the leaders at the national level to stand up for the Constitution and protect people's right to vote. This is an important fight. This fight goes beyond politics. Lawrence, if you look at polling data on the provisions of the For the People Act, polling data on the provisions of the Voting Rights Act, I tell you where the bipartisanship is. It's amongst the American people. I'll tell you where the support is. It's amongst the American people, north, south, east, west, right, center, and left, black, white, Hispanic, indigenous, Asian American, men and women, young and old. The support for the protection of democracy is with the people. Will the leaders of the nation, will the members of the Senate who stand in the way, hear those voters, hear the people, and do what is necessary at this moment in history?